At Schmidt Realty Group, we are passionate about education, training, and professional development. And for our agents, that starts with our real estate mastery program. So today I want to introduce you to our training manager, Brad Bosker, and he's going to walk you through a bit of a sample idea of what one part of one module is about. So I'm just going to bring Brad in here. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining me today.
No
So, Brad,
problem.
tell us a little bit about real estate mastery and how you're involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a training program for new realtors that gets them caught up on all the simple stuff they need to know, but also kind of a lot of the more complex topics that we come across on a fairly regular basis on real estate. So we're going to talk about one of those topics today. My role as a training manager is to basically handle all things related to buyers, everything related to the buying process, working with buyers, helping realtors through their first buyer deals, their first offers, that kind of thing. And then also a lot of the tech stuff is my responsibility on the training side there as well.
So what's the sample topic today that you're going to walk us through?
Well, I figured we'll give a sneak peek into just kind of one small part of our buyer intensive modules. And that topic is backup offers. It's kind of a rarely used corner of real estate, but there's definitely for particular clients in particular moments, there's lots of reasons to kind of want to have that skill set in your repertoire. So it's a unique kind of offer. And I figured let's talk a little bit about what makes backup offers, why people might choose to do them. So a backup offer is an offer written on a property that's already pending. An offer, a property that is conditional, often on things like financing, home inspection. So it's a property that's not sold yet. And I think what a lot of people need to know about backup offers is writing a backup offer on a pending property doesn't reopen the negotiation. It doesn't create a bidding war, and it doesn't kick the current offer aside. A pending deal is a pending deal. And if those buyers waive their conditions on time and as agreed, then that property will be sold. So a backup offer is, the truth about backup offers is they're often not successful. Often the other deal goes through. So the question is, why do people write backup offers? And the answer is because it's that property. It's that unique, perfect property that, you may not have a great chance to get it, but you'll give yourself any chance to get that particular home. So you put in an offer and it's written and negotiated just like any other offer. It goes pending. It just goes pending in second place if it's accepted. And it's just as legally binding as any other offer. And then you sit tight and you wait and you hope that something goes wrong with the first deal. You hope that it falls apart and that you, the client, gets the house. So how could that pending deal fall apart? Well, that buyer could choose not to waive their conditions. They could have a problem with their financing. They could decide they're not satisfied with the home inspection. They could back out and then your client would get the home. Or if it's well written, a backup offer can be successful just as simply if the buyer runs out of time, if they need a few more days, that kind of thing. So like a lot of things in real estate, a good backup offer kind of comes down to how you write it. It comes down to having a lot of intentionality in the wording, in the terms, and the conditions to give your client their best possible chance to get that house that, they may not have a super great chance at, but they would absolutely love to find out that the home is theirs and they are pending in first place. So like a lot of things, there's pros and cons to writing a backup offer, and it's not for everybody and it's not for every situation. So let's start with the cons. Of course, the big one is backup offers aren't always successful. And that means it can be a bit of an exercise in heartache sometimes. I love this home. It's by far the best I've seen. It's a perfect fit for me. And now it's sold. And I need to go back out and hit the open market and look at new homes and compare them to the one that I loved and I lost. And that can be a little bit tricky to do. But the other con, I think it's one that we don't talk about enough. The other con is that a backup offer that's accepted is pending and is legally binding, just like the first offer. And what that really means is our client should hit pause on their search. They shouldn't be out there looking at other homes. They shouldn't be out there writing offers on other properties because they could find themselves in a I've bought two homes at the same time situation. And that's tricky. There's no mechanism built into regular offers that lets you back out because you also bought another house at the same time. And that
Yeah.
means one deal or the other, if you're looking at potentially backing out for illegal reasons, you could put a deposit at risk. Things can get really challenging and risky.
Well, I
So
think that, yeah, it's a common misconception that a lot of people think they don't put a deposit down if it's a backup offer, but they do.
they
And
do.
a lot of buyers think, well, oh, we'll keep looking, and if we find something else, it's kind of like, putting something on hold at the store. You can say, I've changed my mind. It's not like that. You've written a legal contract with a deposit, and if you don't proceed, that deposit could technically be at risk, right? So it's very serious. It's very serious. So it's really something to consider carefully, because it does take a buyer out of the market a bit for a period of time. But if it's the right house, both you and I have seen our buyers at times get the house that they wrote the backup offer on. And that's a pretty happy day. And they always say it was worth the risk, for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and bear in mind, for deposits, you get them back if you back out for legal reasons. So
That's
if you
right.
get the house, but you've also bought something else, if you haven't started your financing and you haven't even done a home inspection, there may not be grounds there to back out and get that deposit
right.
back, and that's a tough situation for anybody to be in. So
And of course, if you're not successful, if your backup offer doesn't complete because the house sells to the first buyer, your deposit goes back to you then as well. But it's much more technical, I think, than people realize.
Yeah. Oh, certainly it is. Yeah. And then really it comes down to how you put that contract down in writing. How do you protect your clients against those kind of outcomes?
Mhm.
Right. So you hit pause with your search. You kind of hope for the best. You hope things play out the way you want to. And then if all goes well, you've bought a house and you haven't bought two. And if things don't go well, then you re-enter the market at that point. So those are the cons, but there's lots of pros to writing backup offers too. And the big one, of course, is it gives your client a shot. No matter how big that shot may be, it gives them a shot at that house that they want to have. But the other thing is, and this is a huge advantage to backup offers, if the current deal falls apart and you have a successful backup offer, then your client is pending. That home does not go back on the open market. There are no other buyers that can write offers to compete with your client. We don't enter a bidding war, or in some cases, re-enter a bidding war. The other buyers don't have a shot at it. Your client immediately becomes pending. So for a hot property, for a hot neighborhood, for a hot time of year, it can be an especially good strategy for that property. Often we'll see backup offers after a multiple offer situation, that the party who might have lost or might have come in second place in a multiple offer might resubmit their backup offer or resubmit their offer as a backup offer in hopes that if the other offer falls apart, a bidding war doesn't need to happen a second time. So it's a good strategy in those kind of situations. And the third pro here is a well-written backup offer actually can apply pressure to the current pending deal. It can make it more likely.
Yes, it can.
And there's a couple ways to do that. I mean, the first one, and probably the most important one here, is that a backup offer should be strong, that the seller has no reason to accept a backup offer that is, $10,000 lower than the offer they have. And a really well-written backup offer is strong enough that the seller actually prefers it over the deal they have, that the seller would love to see the first offer fall apart and for the backup offer to come into effect. And again, the seller can't necessarily tank that deal. If it goes through smoothly, it's still going to be sold. But if the buyer comes back and asks for something after a home inspection, tries to renegotiate, if the buyer needs to add another person to the contract for financing reasons, like a co-signer, then the seller is almost certainly not going to play ball there. And you could find yourself in a situation where you get a home just on that alone. So intentionality goes a long way. So in terms of how you write a backup offer, I mean, it looks a lot like a regular offer. It just, typically contains an additional term that identifies it as a backup, or in some cases, an additional condition. And there's lots of ways to do that. My personal favorite way to do that is to write a term that says, should the current offer to purchase not become unconditional by their deadline, let's say 9 p.m. on Tuesday, then our offer becomes the accepted offer in first place. And hiding in the middle of that is a double negative, and a very intentional double negative. Should the current offer to purchase not become unconditional by 9 p.m. on Tuesday, then we become the accepted offer in first place. So if it's 9:01 and that home is not sold, if it's not completely unconditional, then our client gets the house. And you can see how writing it that way can make it difficult or impossible for the seller to entertain the idea of giving the current buyer an extension, even if they wanted to. So there's another way that a backup offer can come into effect. It's all about the wording. And then you sit tight and wait. And really the next question is, what if it works?
Yes.
And what if the other offer does fall apart? And I have to say, there's a lot of fun phone calls in this business. There's a lot of phone calls that are really fun to make. And, hey, the seller just accepted your counter offer. You got the house. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The seller looked at the 4 offers in front of them and they didn't like the other 3 as much as yours. They chose yours. You got the house. That's a lot of fun. But I think this one's my personal favorite. And I think because it's less likely to happen. And they're very carefully holding on hope to the possibility to call them and say, hey, I just got a call. Looks like they did not waive conditions last night. Looks like the house is yours. It's pending. You got the house.
That's a very happy phone call.
Yes, one of my absolute favorites for sure. And at that point, you're pending. You book a home inspection. You go through the financing process. You do things just like you normally would. And you've got a client who's been very well taken care of. And in a situation like that, where things played out the way they did, you've also got a client who going forward is likely going to take good care of you as well. So it's an overwhelmingly positive situation when it works out that way.
Well, it's like I said, I think it's all much more technical than sometimes, buyers might think, and even, brand new realtors, it is really complex. And as you can see, it's, there's strategy involved. It's not simply just the use of, a term to say this is a backup offer. What's the strategy? And similarly, on the seller side, which, we would discuss on the seller, one of the seller modules, how does a seller receive a backup offer? When is it a good idea for a seller to accept one? When might a seller not want to accept one? So this is just a little taste of the kind of conversations and training sessions that we have in our 20 module program, which we call Real Estate Mastery. And those modules are usually between 2 and 3 hours long. Them are 3 hours long, in-person classroom with lots of lively discussion. And then following that, there is actual, real-time, on the phone, texting, email, in-person mentoring to coach our agents through the practical situation that they then run into where they think, wait a sec, this is a backup offer. I need to talk to Brad because he had some important strategies that I need to remember, and he's there for our agents. So it's a very in-depth program. So hopefully this was just an enjoyable sneak peek for you. And Brad, if people want to know a little bit more, where's a good place for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, we have my phone number. This is my personal cell number and my email address on the screen here. So if anybody has any questions about that training process, what that looks like, what happens when the mastery program is done and I have a real client who wants to do something like write a backup offer, what kind of supports are offered there, then feel free to reach out anytime for sure. All 3 of us are happy to chat for sure.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap that up, Brad. I know it's the spring market is getting busy, so I know that you have lots to do today. Thanks for taking a few minutes to share just a little taste of Real Estate Mastery this morning. And whatever the rest of you are up to for the rest of the day, I wish you a good day. Catch up with you later, Brad. Bye. Thanks. For now.